All right, where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with
I know where we'll start.
the bet that I lost.
We'll start with next week because, as you'll notice, if you're watching, I told people to watch this on YouTube to expect greatness, to expect a spectacle for their eyes, a feast,
physical countenance,
a feast for their eyes, because you failed to press 225 overhead. It wasn't really close. I think you tapped out at 185, and it wasn't all your fault. Neil was on your side, and I think Neil, our founder, Neil Hornsby, I think he didn't coach you well enough. So I'm going to blame him partially for this. Neil has been eating, as he lost this bet, and I forced him to eat Nathan Yankee's diet, which consists of microwavable cheese pizza and Coke Zero. So he's in the process of actually slowly killing himself. Your forfeit was to wear a Zeke cutoff shirt of your favorite band. Now, something happened with the delivery of the shirt. So that is going to happen next week. Next week, you are going to look like you've never looked before. And on top of that, we're going to have, I guess this is our first guest.
Yep. Well, we had Steve on once, but
we had Steve on once, but this is our first external guest. We're going to have a Hall of Famer on the podcast, Fred Gaudelli, who is, I guess, my boss in some way, shape or form. He is the producer of Sunday Night Football. He produced Monday Night Football back when it was very good. He's produced many, many drafts. He is a New York Giants fan through and through. So it is going to be a blast. He is a historian of football, similar to you. He is an incredibly successful guy in terms of what he's done. So it should be a blast.
I for one, hope that after a week of not eating, so that I will look halfway presentable in the Zeke crop top, that I'll still be able to, function properly on Wednesday to talk to the great Fred Gaudelli. But I'm really excited for that.
The good thing is,
I would say I didn't top out. I mean, I topped out at about 205.
Well, so I was going to bring that up. To speak to how poor Neil's coaching was, on Monday of last week, you hit 205. And I got a little worried. I was supremely confident when I made the bet because we work out every day together.
You know my limitations.
But then I saw you get 205 up. I said, maybe with enough adrenaline, he could get there. And, Neil just did you wrong.
Neil's been a great sport this entire time. In fact, despite eating what I imagine is arguably food this week, he has had a lot of energy. His tweets, his weekly or his daily
daily interviews,
3 question daily interviews.
I would go with interrogations.
Yeah,
because they're in the dark at 6:45.
I have never seen Neil more excited about anything as I've seen him this week during free agency.
It's also free agency week, and Neil. The cool thing, I berated Neil a little bit. One of the coolest things about Neil is how much he loves football. And so it's been a blast to see him suffer through eating cheese pizza and be excited about free agency. We also know the first game of next year, Canton, the Hall of Fame game, which is going to have future Hall of Famer Joe Flacco in it. I'm sure Fred is already prepping for it, so we'll be able to talk to him about that as well. Let's go to mean tweets. Let's start with this. So,
You know what the me losing the bet's really going to benefit is it's going to lessen the burden on you in terms of mean tweets for at least 1 week, because I will be probably the subject of them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But until then, we have HOF Coach Tim. So presumably somebody named Tim who is a Hall of Fame coach, maybe in his own mind, maybe in somebody else's mind. But he starts off, and I believe this is for our Jets or 49ers video up on YouTube. Great stuff. Dumbass Chahrouri going off, ... Somebody please tell this guy our top need is pass rush, referring to the 49ers, not secondary. We will pursue Earl Thomas nonetheless.
Hall of Fame coach.
And likely get a cornerback either in free agency or the draft, but 2 edge rushers and inside linebacker are our top needs first.
Capitalize.
We will not trade down. Jesus how does this guy still have a job at PFF? Which I can only presume that last sentence is a prayer.
Look, anytime you can ask Jesus a question when you lead off with dumbass, gotta do it, man. I love these. These are great. Next one is from Matt N.
Not getting Earl Thomas an upset.
Well, look, if you have a Hall of Fame coach on the job, you'd expect to get it done. Matt N. said...
Edited.
Yeah, he edited. I can't imagine what this said first. Pretty much done trusting anything related to PFF after watching this. Straight up pathetic. P.S. Fat Ben Roethlisberger over there should really cut some weight. Wow. Aggressive by Matt N. over there.
God, George. I know George has gained a little bit of weight here, but geez. Okay. I was interested in this segment, Garrett Hens, until it got repetitive and illogical.
Me too.
Just saying trade down for every team isn't really that realistic, nor is it really applicable for every team. Well, we were referring to one team at the time, but let's go on. Especially in this quarterback poor draft.
He's watched all the tape.
I doubt more than a few teams even try to trade up, making this whole discussion moot. If you want to argue corner versus D-line versus receiver, I have to read more. Anyway, he goes on to discuss how he knows that D-line is more important than coverage players.
He felt it. He didn't say anything mean about fat Seth Rogen over there, though. Those are my favorite. I have to throw those in because I'm the one that gets all the hate. So people think that I look mean and am mean, and they let me know about it, which I think is funny because I actually make a conscious effort to try and be positive about things because I know that I tend to come off in my natural resting state as looking pissed off. In fact, every time I'm about to go somewhere with my girlfriend, she reminds me to smile and like pretend to be happy on purpose because
George is the first person in the history of the world where a woman tells him to smile more.
Thanks.
Yeah, so here's an interesting thing. So yeah, the Seth Rogen thing, the Ben Roethlisberger thing. I think you're adding the weight component to it. However, those are like the digs that make up for all it's.
I added nothing. I added absolutely nothing.
It's like an 18-1 bet, right? Like you get 18, small comments, and then I get the hammer, which is. Comparing me to Seth Rogen.
Here's another one. Who's the guy that ate Seth Rogen? Wow. That is aggressive. Okay. We have some funny football tweets as well. This one pertaining to your Vikings. So this is the week that The Bachelor finished, and it's funny that it happens at the same time as free agency. Just made me think again that the draftler, a free agentler would work really well with teams pining for players' affection.
Listen, if Fred wants to change gears a little bit,
NBC's the draft. We'll pitch it to him. I bet you he has not watched The Bachelor, but we'll ask anyways. Speaking of The Bachelor, a team that is in need of losing its virginity, the Vikings, had Anthony Barr on his way to New York. And we were told countless times by people on Twitter that, Greg Williams is going to know. He's going to know better than we will how to utilize Anthony Barr. Anthony Barr hears this and makes a U-turn, goes back to the Vikings, which is great for you because now your Super Bowl hope's intact.
Yeah, this tweet from Dave Mason at betonline.ag. Vikings were plus 1,800 to win the Super Bowl with Anthony Barr. The Vikings were plus 1,800 to win the Super Bowl without Anthony Barr. And the Vikings are plus 1,800 to win the Super Bowl with Anthony Barr.
Congratulations.
Inside linebackers, man.
Can I ask you this as a Vikings fan? So you obviously know a lot of people. Were they like really excited to get him back? Because they're probably still going to play him at that same position. I would almost argue like you might as well give him a shot at being an edge rusher because his coverage has been terrible.
Almost everybody I knew that I thought, understand the Vikings well, thought that Barr was gone and that the Vikings were not going to value him much. I think what was the most surprising thing is that another team forced the Vikings' hand into overpaying him. I thought that was one of the least likely, outcomes. People like him and think he's really good and think he's an integral part of that defense. It appears Zimmer feels the same way. I'm a little skeptical. I even wrote the curious career of Anthony Barr in Minnesota and then published it, I think, like Monday or Tuesday night, and then it got like switched because of this silly news. So I don't know. Anyway, good for Anthony Barr for getting paid. I don't think it's going to, as Dave Mason, BOL, says, it's not going to move the needle much for the Vikings, and it might hurt them in terms of signing free agents, you know, say to protect Kirk Cousins.
Just got to get those guards solidified. All right, let's talk trades here. So the first trade that happened, Antonio Brown for a third, number 66, and a fifth, number 142. They also end up paying him more, so it goes up from about like $39 million to $50 million over the next 3 years. And to me, we talked about this before, Antonio Brown versus Odell, which one would you rather trade for? And we thought that Odell would require 2 first-round picks. So we were kind of, well, if you have to give up a second for Antonio Brown, like that's the way to go. So in your mind, was this a huge win for the Raiders?
Yeah. I mean, the money doesn't have as much utility to the Raiders as it does to a team like the Chiefs or the Vikings or a team that's strapped against the cap. So, you know, you can only do so much in free agency like they have, you know, but like having more money, as we've seen with the Jets, just makes you make more mistakes, right? So I have no problem with sort of buying into Brown for these next few years, especially given how it sort of screws over the screws over the Steelers too. And then the draft pick compensation is almost nothing. So you're going to get, I think, a couple pretty good years out of Brown, regardless of who that QB is. And then if you take a chance and go up and get Kyler Murray, you're going to have a number 1 receiver to go with him. I think adding Tyrell Williams in addition to this really helps their offense.
Right.
Trent Brown it wasn't a great signing, but he's going to probably play an okay left tackle for them.
We'll talk about Trent Brown.
So I think this is a good trade for the Raiders.
There's no way that you are approaching the level of production with a receiver that you are picking at number 66. No chance. This also helps them avoid over picking DK Metcalf, for example, right? So you have this opportunity now to provide whoever is throwing passes for the 49ers two guys now that they can actually throw the ball to who will get open. So that's huge. To me, the next step is then to try and trade up for Kyler Murray. I think we have enough of a sample size of Derek Carr to know that he is going to top out at, you know, a 12 to 15 guy in his best season. However, Big
Ben wasn't good last year.
Right. That's the funny thing, is that people make it seem as if he's taken a step down, Antonio Brown, that is. I don't think there's any evidence to that whatsoever. So we're in agreement. I think the Antonio Brown trade was easily one of the 3 or 4 best moves that has happened so far in free agency. That brings us to the Odell Beckham trade. So Odell Beckham, who, I don't know if you know this, terrible person. Horrible person, destroyed the culture of the Giants single-handedly. The reason they have not been a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I mean, how many Super Bowls have they won since he was on the team?
Forced them to throw the ball in situations where they could have run. He has been traded. They have got him off of the team for a first, number 17, and a third, number 95, plus Mr. Jabril Peppers.
Yeah, so we talked about 2 first-round picks. Like, you have to sort of squint to see that here, but a first plus a guy who was a first.
You really do, because Jabril Peppers lines up 45 yards off the line of scrimmage.
So Peppers, you can kind of, like, I would say, you know, you only get 2 years of his rookie deal, but he was a first-round pick. Even if you take him plus that third, you are sort of talking about value that approaches 2 first-round picks. So the Giants at least got some return here, but good golly, they make almost no sense in terms of like anything they do. Like from a thematic perspective, you're rebuilding with a 38-year-old quarterback making $22 million a year. You obviously want to like build an offensive line around him. That's why they got the Zeitler in the trade. You know, you got Soldier, Hernandez a season ago. Like
Soldier, what a great pickup by them.
Yeah, right. I mean, Trent Brown. So like, and then you draft Barkley, and you're like, okay, we're in win now mode. We're trying to leverage all these things. Then you stink for a year, and now you're like, let's rebuild. But then you're not quite like. I mean, they are somewhat in position to get somebody like Haskins, but do they really believe that Haskins is this rebuilding around type of quarterback? So it is really curious. And of course, like as our friend Kevin Clark said on The Ringer today, like, trading your best player is almost never good.
No, it's not. By the way, very good article by Kevin Clark on The Ringer. Go check it out. Well, I had the name somewhere, but I don't have it. Anyways, just go find it.
Yeah, searching for superstars in NFL's bargain bin on The Ringer. He makes a lot of great points. I think one of them that we were talking about at the office privately, and we've had discussions with Neil about and all that kind of stuff, is this idea of culture. Like, when you have talented people, it is on the onus of management and it is on the onus of the coaches to manage those folks. Like, Odell Beckham was not a problem to be solved. He was a tension to be managed. These are things where if you have talented people, like, you're never going to get a good football team of 53 choir boys. It is never going to happen. And
well, so
you have to be able to manage
a slightly
these
more
people.
Pessimistic view on it. Everyone kind of sucks. And in a bad situation, people are those things are going to metastasize. And that is why management is tough, because what you are doing is working with a variety of different types of people who have different leanings and things like that. And that's why it's so hard to do those things. And that's why they pay general managers and coaches so much money. The situation dictates how these things happen. That's why the Patriots can bring in players like a Randy Moss, who, people are losing their mind over his culture destruction in other places, and then he comes over there. So to me, the way that Odell Beckham was portrayed, because I actually don't think his actions were nearly as bad as they were portrayed.
I mean, if you're a wide receiver and you're not pissed off that Eli Manning is your quarterback, there's something wrong with you. Like,
fair.
Like,
this is very
acting
fair.
rationally.
This is very fair. But this is a reflection of, to me, what Dave Gettleman has sort of failed to do since he came over there. But this is a huge win for the Browns, right? They legitimize themselves as a juggernaut offense in a time where you have to have a great offense to win in the NFL, particularly, well, a great offense means you're great at passing the ball. They've also made some plays on the coverage side of the ball. So establish the pass, stop the pass has been their MO, which is great. My question to you is this. You're a Chiefs fan, a Mahomes and Tyreek Hill fan. Over the next 3 to 5 years, is there a duo you would rather have than Odell and Baker?
Yeah, I mean, I'd still take Mahomes and Hill. Hill's younger, less injury history. Mahomes, I think, is a better prospect than Mayfield, but I think it's close.
I do think it's very close. I think it's a really interesting conversation. Obviously, they haven't played together yet. To me, Odell is a more versatile receiver than Tyreek Hill is, and Mahomes, after 1 year, has been a more exciting prospect than Mayfield.
The receiver that I always compared Hill to, because a lot of people wanted to compare him to like Percy Harvin and gadget guys like Tavon Austin and all that BS. I thought it was Steve Smith.
Oh, interesting.
I thought Tyreek Hill was a faster version of Steve Smith. He's a number one receiver who's just smaller and does a lot of those big things.
Okay.
But I think
I was going to say Deshaun Jackson.
But Beckham is, as you said, I think Beckham is a better overall player as a receiver, just because of he's going to win the jump balls. He's going to do. I think Hill just wins one way, a couple different ways, which is being faster and quicker than everybody. But I think Beckham is faster and quicker than everybody. Has great hands, great leaping ability. I just think the difference between Mayfield and Mahomes is a little bit bigger than
I think we'll find out a lot this year, because to me, what Mahomes had in his year off, people think of Mahomes as a rookie. I don't. So I really want to see them after this year. Mayfield dealt with Hugh Jackson. So
if you look at if you look at some places, so the over under for the Browns win total has been posted.
First one,
9.5. It started the week at even money for over 9.5, minus 140 on under 9.5. It currently stands at plus 150 at over 9.5, minus 200. Are we starting on the under? Are we starting to get to where the over has some value?
9.5. 9.5 is a lot. To me, the big question mark here is Freddie Kitchens. I think there was a little bit of variance to each side on the week 1 through 8 and the week 9 through 17 side of things that I'm not quite ready to buy in on. Right, ton of drops, all of a sudden no drops. Now the receivers are getting better, obviously, so that should help. But winning 10 games is tough, man. The Ravens are going to be competitive once again. The Steelers have started to reload.
They have a skinny version of me at quarterback, apparently.
So, not my words.
Not your words. The thing about the Browns that's going to be tough is that they face the AFC East, which
True.
is, I think, the Patriots game is a loss, generally, you have to assume. They face the NFC West, which, you know, the Rams are a Super Bowl team. Seahawks are a good team that we think might regress, but are a good team.
The Niners are going to the Super Bowl this year.
The Niners are going to be
Super Bowl
okay.
teams, really.
And Kyler Murray is going to want some revenge for having to sit behind Mayfield when they face the Cardinals. So, to me, it's going to be tough from a schedule perspective. But I can certainly see, you know, if this gets up to like plus 200, I kind of want to take it.
What if it goes? What if it just goes down to 9 when they? Because they'll re-release these obviously once they release them all.
If it's even at 9, I probably would take. Because you get the opportunity for a push at 9 and 7. A lot. Yeah, I think I think 9's a far better number here than 9.5.
I think that's what the juice is showing. 9 is really tough for me. I have a hard time, man,
rooting against Mayfield too. I mean, like
that's what I was about to say. I really like Mayfield. I really like a lot of players on that team. They're fans. I feel that we have some here. It'd be nice to see them succeed. Okay.
Can we talk about D Ford D Niner for a little bit?
Please stop. Man, D Ford.
That joke was not received well in Skype last night.
No, was not. D Ford, a pass rusher who was great last year, has been anything but consistent over the course of his career. Traded for a 2020 second, and of course he was tagged. So the real thing here is this sort of a signing. 5 years, $90 million. As someone that once cheered for D Ford, what do you think?
Well, he certainly has more utility for the Niners than he does for the Chiefs. That being said, I think this is a bit much. I think, you know, for Kansas City, the uncertainty associated with a guy who had 4 mediocre at best seasons, who's pretty one-dimensional, and who is going to cost a lot of a cap that they don't have a ton of. This was a good trade for them, and I think getting a second next year is a pretty solid move. They got a second this year for Marcus Peters last year, and then not having to pay this amount of money gives them a lot of freedom. They have Ronald Darby in the city today. If you get to Kansas City, Missouri, you don't leave. So
mainly because you just don't want to go back to the airport.
They did a really good job of generating pressure on the quarterback last year, and it didn't matter.
Being negative was great airport. Love Kansas City.
So bad.
Barbecue's amazing.
Yeah, the Power and Light District. Okay.
As a 49er fan, I'm not jazzed about it, obviously, given the amount of money that you are paying a pass rusher when you literally can't cover anyone. And part of what we're going to do next week is rehash the coverage versus
pressure debate
versus pass rush debate, right? Because more people have thrown their hats into the ring. We've heard some talks about, okay, well, let's actually think about the way offenses will attack you given different strengths. And so we're going to rehash that. But knowing what we already know, which is that at a very macro level and with a large sample size, coverage is more important for winning games than pass rush. I think it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
The pick is like, not great, but whatever.
I mean, the Niners are clearly trying to at least get themselves to 500 or better this year. So.
Can I say this, though? Here's my positivity reining in.
Got to sit up.
The positivity, George, is saying this. D Ford being brought in makes them trying to trade down more likely. They don't need a pass rusher as much. People won't start, losing their minds in the streets of San Francisco or San Jose, where they actually play, if they don't end up getting Bosa.
As HOF coach Tim said, they need an inside linebacker and 2 edge rushers, though. So you've only gotten 1.
Well, we also got a linebacker in Quan Alexander. God. I don't know if we can talk about this. I might get fired. Seitler for Vernon was another trade. Who cares? The trade that I actually like is Deshaun Jackson, who I mentioned earlier. Do you not like the Deshaun Jackson Tyreek Hill comparison?
No, I like
prime Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, I think
Hill's more versatile.
Yeah, it's weird though. Like I think Jackson's a different, like, sounds stupid, but a different body type.
Well,
Hill's small and compact, and
sure, but they're both so fast,
skinny and tall. Yeah.
Like Deshaun Jackson, his prime was just getting behind your defense.
Yeah, well, that's what Hill does, and they both return kicks pretty well, and so that's a good. And Jackson was a #1 receiver, getting 1,000-yard seasons like Hill.
He was really good.
Hill is now.
But Deshaun Jackson now goes to the Eagles, and this brings us back to our culture point. The Eagles have built a strong culture. They have built a winning team. It allows them to steal players like Deshaun Jackson from teams with terrible culture or unproven culture, like the Bucs currently have with Bruce Arians coming in. And that's what the Steelers do. The Eagles are doing it here, just pilfering players that are going to be far more valuable on their team than they are to other people's teams. I thought this was a great move.
Yeah, I think, and
positivity.
As we talked about, I think on the YouTube channel, that he's not going to be asked to do all that much, and guys like Nelson Aguilar are going to be asked to do less, which is good because he's good as a bit player, not a full-time player on the outside for them.
Okay, we've moved on past the trades. So here's what we're going to do for a little free agency rundown. Play a little good cop, bad cop. You get to be the bad cop. I have to say only positive things about each of these signings. We're going to keep this nice and quick. Are you ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock.
Okay, let's do this. Adrian Amos to the Packers, $437, $11 guaranteed. I thought this was fantastic. Mike Renner also thought this was fantastic. I don't know if he wrote an article about it. I think he did. You could probably check it out at ProFootballFocus.com.
Mike barely had his pants on during a few of these like Packers pickups on the
That's
other day.
true. Here's the thing. It's a guy that is versatile, can play coverage, fits in with what the Packers like to do, which is play a ton of DBs, and a relatively cheap contract. The Packers' issues have been their inability to cover. They are bolstering that through the draft and free agency. I thought this was a very good signing.
I've never heard of Adrian Amos before, so that's why I think it's a bad signing. That would be my bad cop reaction to this. But, of course, I like the signing as well.
CJ Mosley. The attacks are hurtful.
The attacks.
It's okay. I'll read another mean tweet here in a second. Next up, CJ Mosley, 5 years, $85 million, 51 guaranteed to the New York Jets. Let's just lump him in there with Le'Veon Bell, so I can kill two birds with one stone. The positive news here is they build a strong. No.
Bart Scott went from the Ravens to the Jets and did well.
Here's the positive news. They have Sam Darnold. What's your take on this?
I mean, this is... Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. The Jets lucked out when Barr reneged. They were not as lucky here with Mosley.
Well said. I mean... The funny thing about this is that, I mean, this contract is astronomical. Think about what the Raiders are going to have to pay. Oh, dang it. I'm supposed to be positive. Not going to say it. Not going to say it. Okay, let's keep going. Trent Brown, 4 years, $66 million, 37 guaranteed to the Oakland Raiders. Here is the positive spin on this contract. There is a chance that Dante Scarnecchia is so good that he has actually changed Trent Brown, and that when Trent Brown goes to Las Vegas, where they have all of the amazing buffets that the world has to offer, he will actually resist.
I'm having a stroke.
And be a stud left tackle, also converting Colton Miller to the place that he can finally succeed.
Oh, you're getting a contact Scarnecchia. Wow. Okay.
There it is.
So here's the thing. Las Vegas is way too freaking hot and humid on a daily basis.
True.
Trent Brown will block out the sun and allow Derek Carr to be more comfortable in the pocket in their new home.
You're bad cop, though.
He's Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry. I'm not good at this. No, this is a clear and definitive example of taking something that's average in a good scheme and bringing it to an average to below average scheme and hoping it'll succeed.
Look, if you cannot learn from what the Giants did, you've got to do it. Bobby Hart, that was semi-negative, not totally negative. Bobby Hart, 3 years, $21 million. Back to Cincy, Vegas. The positive spin on this, $21 million in Cincinnati, basically $100 million. Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, and so despite the fact that Bobby has the heart of a champion, he was one of 3 tackles that gave up like more than 10 sacks last year. I mean, this is not going to be a good. Let's just hope that the Bengals draft somebody so that Bobby Hart can be the most expensive swing tackle in the NFL.
A player that is far better than Bobby Hart, signed by the Buffalo Bills, Ty Nsekhe, 2 for 14 and a half. This, I thought, was one of the better signings of the entire free agency process. I predict that in 2 years, he will re-sign for perhaps what Trent Brown is currently making. I think he will be better than Trent Brown over the next couple of years.
Josh Allen is going to make tackles look poor, no matter how good they are, and so this is I'm not necessarily as I
mean, that's the nice thing about our grading system,
right? Yeah, but to the degree that people are not looking at that information and just looking at, let's watch some film of Josh Allen running into a sack.
Grind some tape. Eric Weddle, 2 for 11. Another example of a great team with great culture pilfering, stealing a player that is going to play to maximize what he has left in the tank on this team and this culture. I thought this was, again, one of the better signings so far. Can't have enough guys that can cover deep.
Yeah, I think the issue here is, of course, that Weddle is too versatile. He misses too few tackles. He covers too well in the slot. He's been a part of too many winning teams. And, yeah.
There you go. We get on to the Lions now. Trey Flowers, 5 years, $90 million, 56 guaranteed. The good news, well, he'll be productive rushing the passer, and that's what you hope for.
Yeah, it's going to cost them, though. And the issue is, of course, like when we first saw this, it was about $16 million per, which I thought was a pretty reasonable deal. At $18 million per with 56 guaranteed,
that's a lot.
You're kind of I think he's less of a Trent Brown than Trent Brown, but at the same time, you're buying into this idea that somehow Patricia can do what Belichick did. And
we saw that last year.
That's a long-term winner.
The positive spin on this is that Trey Flowers is a pass rusher. Pass rushing is stable. We would expect him to continue to be solid. The issue is whenever you have a player that was great for the Patriots and they decide not to pay him, that probably means something. Jordan Hicks, 4 for 34. The great thing about Jordan Hicks is that he is a couple years removed from being very valuable, over a win above replacement, because of his coverage ability. You're buying a player at the bottom of his value, but you know the possibility. He came back and showed some signs. I thought this was a great pickup.
I just don't think he's tough enough to play linebacker in the NFL.
I really like
if I can get a linebacker like Mosley for $17 million a year, I'd take him over a guy for less than 9.
That's what's hilarious.
The guy's offering toughness to my team.
How quickly can you answer this question? Would you rather have C.J. Mosley or Jordan Hicks at the same price?
They don't have anything to measure how quick.
Yeah, it's Jordan Hicks, and it's not even close. Like what the Cards are doing. Let's go to Sheldon Richardson, 3 for 37 to the Cleveland Browns. The positive spin on this is the Browns are winning the Super Bowl this year, so he gets a Super Bowl ring.
He doesn't have a lot of... I know he's 14th in pressure among interior players, but he just doesn't have the sacks, dude. Just doesn't have the sacks.
Forgot about that. Forgot about the importance of sacks. LaMarcus Joyner to the Raiders, 4 for 42. So I think this is too much. for LaMarcus Joyner. I don't think it's way too much for LaMarcus Joyner.
Are you playing bad cop or good cop right now?
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. But the reason you are the Raiders, you are rebuilding, you're going to have to pay a little bit of a premium to get good players onto your team. And so they're doing that here. Unlike the Trent Brown situation, I think Joyner will greatly help a team that can't cover anybody and will help rebuild the culture in Oakland.
My negative would be that Joyner's is too much. So he hasn't played safety for that long. You're kind of buying into 2-year sample of that. And that's a lot of money for a safety market that is should be pretty depressed, given Weddle got what he got.
Earl Thomas, 4 for 55. He is a package deal in this good cop, bad cop with Mark Ingram at 3 for 15. So my positive spin on this is that Earl Thomas is, when he is playing, the best safety in the NFL, and you're going to need to be able to keep that defense intact.
And once the defense has your team in the game, you're going to need a guy like Mark Ingram making $5 million a year to back up Gus Edwards.
Couple more here. So this one is probably the best one. Nick Foles, $22 million. The positive is that you have paid him enough to earn the respect of the locker room the second that he sets foot in there, because everyone knows that the quickest way to earn respect is just to be making more money than everyone else. It's a proven fact.
Why did he need the nickname if he needed the money?
Right. It's hilarious. Like, it actually flies in the face of everything that we have heard.
Acquiring the nickname have been enough for the respect?
Well, here's the interesting thing. We have seen already, the proof is there, that when you make him an underdog is when he succeeds.
Interesting.
But you have now made him a favorite by paying him $22 million a year. So
would it have been that hard to call the Vikings and say, what price did you pay for the respect that Kirk got in the locker room?
What would you have to pay Kirk Cousins to continue giving pep talks pregame, the huddle pep talk?
I bet
Nick Foles is at least better at that. All right, that was good cop, bad cop. A couple of other things here to talk about. There's some more teams that have done some things. Your Chiefs, Honey Badger, Carlos Hyde. You must be very excited about Carlos Hyde.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can sign a backup running back for more than what you could pay a rookie, you do it.
You have to do it. The best player left in free agency, I think we both agree, is Ronald Darby. Would signing Ronald Darby make up for Carlos Hyde in your mind?
Yeah. None of these teams are perfect. Bill Belichick drafted Sony Michel in the first round.
This is true. The Cardinals also got Terrell Suggs. I thought that was a good move. They also signed Robert Alford. Let's move on to the AAF. The AAF, our pick last week was Salt Lake plus 5.5. I tried to watch the game. I struggled through it. I made it through the second straight defensive touchdown surrendered by Salt Lake before I had to turn it off, before I threw things into the glass windows in my apartment.
You know it's a good pick when the other team scores 2 defensive touchdowns and a third one set up by another turnover, and you still get the cover.
Yeah.
So
that was a great pick. You guys want to make sure you check out the AAF picks of the week. Eric will be live tweeting most of the games. Actually, our buddy Arif. If you don't have internet access to watch the game, like you can't stream it, you can just go on Twitter and Arif will let you see every single play that is worth watching. So you can go check it out. So this week, Eric, lead me.
Oh yeah. So Orlando's the best team in the AAF. So I think that there's some places where you can get them for plus 125 to win the entire thing. Wow. I actually think that's some value.
What do you get if you win the AAF?
Respect in the locker room.
Is it like the free taco night at Taco Bell? If you hold a team under 100,
respect in the locker room.
You get respect with a K and then some free tacos.
So, so this week I think probably the best value is Birmingham +6 at our San Diego Fleet on Sunday night.
Does that mean I get a chance to bet on MVP of the AAF, Trent Richardson?
Yeah, so Birmingham got a spark last week with the quarterback change. San Diego won in the game we talked about with Salt Lake, but they needed 3 essentially gimme touchdowns to do it.
Yeah.
Mike Bercovici is still Mike Bercovici. They are laying 6 at home.
Nice guy.
Yeah, I think Birmingham, though.
Positive.
I think Birmingham comes in with their defense and covers that 6 points.
Beautiful. That was your AAF. Now we're going to go on to our team review/preview for the number 5 pick, the Tampa Bay Bucs. Great news. They signed Donovan Smith. I didn't have great news in there. I just interjected it because it's my new positive vibe. 3 years.
You're doing a great job.
$41 million. Guy that has been basically an average tackle, so got to pay them. They were 5-11 last year. Almost somehow, right? They had one of the highest graded on a per snap basis quarterbacks in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and yet win 5 games. They start off by beating the Saints in what was a huge underdogs. Like, you would have figured they were sailing over this number.
Yeah, they started the season off 2-0. They beat Philly in week 2 at home. They over-under was 6.5. We had about 6.68, so kind of right on that number. Somehow don't go over that despite starting the year 2-0. They had that Monday night game in week 3 against Pittsburgh where they almost won. We backed them against Chicago +3, lost. We had the under in week 1, Tampa Bay, New Orleans. I think that game went over by halftime. And then at week 17, our Falcons -1 at Tampa came back from 17 points down to win and cover. So we finally got a win. Last year we were 1-6 picking Tampa Bay games.
It's not good.
This year 1-2. So it's really been a team that we've had a difficult time figuring out. Their most valuable players, as you said,
Vita Vea.
Fitzmagic.
No, it wasn't Vita Vea.
Mike Evans, O.J. Howard, Deshaun Jackson. There's a theme here, by the way.
Would have thought for sure first-round pick Vita Vea was
Chris
there.
Godwin. So all these members of their passing game. And then Levante David, the linebacker the 49ers just signed. And then their least valuable players, Caleb Benovich, Cameron Brate, Isaiah Johnson, Adarius Taylor, and William Golson.
By the way, I managed to get through free agency without talking about what you just mentioned, and you didn't call me on it, so that's a win for me.
So here's the interesting thing. So the Buccaneers offense, the Buccaneers are really this classic example of like how much the rushing game doesn't move the needle. So Tampa was 11th in total offense in terms of EPA per play, 7th in passing, 32nd in running. So you're the worst running team in the league. You're still somehow 11th in expected points added. Yeah. On defense, they were 29th in EPA allowed, 31st in pass defense, 14th in rush defense. So they're still negative. They're giving up negative expected points for run play.
5-11,
but they're giving up a ton of pass. And so as we see here, coverage matters, and Tampa Bay really struggled there.
The funny thing about being 7th in passing is that both guys that played quarterback for them just turned the ball over left and right.
Yeah.
So that tells you how much they were generating on a per throw basis to overcome those turnovers. There were many of them. Of course, this season, the real return isn't necessarily Vita Vea. It's Bruce Arians, who's bringing in what you would expect to be something similar to the offense that he ran with Carson Palmer and the Cardinals. Yeah. Now, most people remember the tail end of that offense, which was not very pretty, and that was in large part because, well, Carson Palmer was a statue, their offensive line was a sieve, and you shave a couple of tenths of a second off the time you have in the pocket. Can't quite get the ball 15 yards downfield every single play.
Well, they went 8-8 that year, starting Blaine Gabbert and Drew Stanton for half the season, if not more. So, I think Arians is pretty solid in terms of,
He certainly is. I mean, in 2015, they led the NFL in EPA per play. Carson Palmer was an MVP candidate. I don't think anyone's going to say Carson Palmer, is a cluster one quarterback on balance, right? They dominated the intermediate level, gained more expected points per intermediate throw than any other team in the NFL. They threw more of them than any other team in the NFL. So if they can just you got to feel like Jameis Winston / Ryan Fitzpatrick, sort of the perfect quarterback tandem for Bruce Arians. Jameis Winston was a guy who finished second in positive throw rate last year. Like, the guy made some throws. The problem was he was 30th in avoiding negatively graded throws, 31st in avoiding turnover-worthy plays.
That's a trait that sticks.
So, but here's the thing. If you are going to somehow win with a guy that is doing that, you need to have an offense like Arians has proven he can generate that is going to give him throws to make at the intermediate level to take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, and so they lost Adam Humphries to Tennessee. Humphries was like the next player on the most valuable list. They traded Deshaun Jackson. So right now they're going in with Mike Evans and they're going in with Chris Godwin as their 2 starting receivers. We got a question here on Twitter by Lord Adam Murfitt, who was basically asking about a running back, so we'll ignore that. But also, what will Perriman bring to the Bucs offense under Arians? I think Perriman showed us something a little bit in Cleveland last year, sort of a deep threat, a guy very limited in his skill set. But I do think we've seen that in Arizona before with the John Browns and the guys that can run the deep patterns. That is certainly something that Arians values. And so I think as a third receiver in that offense, he just signed there this week, will be, I think, an underrated signing in my opinion.
Interesting. I was going to say that, everyone's going to talk about how this is going to help Mike Evans, and I think it will. But to me, Godwin and Howard are the guys that have the potential to just really shine here. I think their offense, if that offensive line can just hold up, right, can be really good. The thing that I would like to see them add, this is going to, not at 5. We'll talk about pick 5 here in a second. But what I'd like to see them add is a running back that can catch the ball.
Yeah.
We saw what David Johnson was. He basically became a receiver, right? His average depth of target was about 4 yards downfield with Arians. If they can get a guy that can do some of those things, maybe in the 3rd round or something of this draft, right, that could really be a weapon.
Like James Williams from Washington State's a classic example of a guy who is like James White, where you put him in there and he's an extra receiver. He can flex out. He does a lot of those great things. I agree with you, because none of their backs are any good, and they haven't shown that. Here's a question from Moo12152, who is a pretty good follow on Twitter. Do they trade Jason Pierre-Paul for a solid corner if possible? I think he likes the cut of our jib. He understands what our answer to this question would be.
That's possible?
I mean, I think that there are still teams that value edge players over coverage players.
If you called me and you said, hey,
I'm giving you JPP
George,
and a 3.
We're both GMs. I'd like to trade you Jason Pierre-Paul. And my response is, oh, for what? And you start saying corner, I'm hanging up.
But if you're Minnesota, right, Everson Griffin's falling off a little bit. They really don't have anybody behind him.
Yeah.
And you're trying to trade Trey Waynes.
I think that would be ideal. To me, I think this goes hand in hand with what you're trying to do and accomplish with that 5th pick, right? So if you're not going to take a quarterback, which, look, I don't think should be out of the question here, certainly, you have to be looking at a guy in coverage, right?
No, I mean, they were brutal there. Brent Grimes is a free agent. And as this gentleman with the Jerry curl on Twitter asks, what do the Bucs do with Vernon Hargreaves? PFF _Stev? Stefan? He says, what do you do with Vernon Hargreaves? And that's a great question. Hargreaves, a former 1st-round pick, started in the slot, moved out of there, moved back, has really struggled. I mean, I think
you got to be ready to
move on,
cut bait there.
But if he can, I mean, we've seen before corners who focus on the slot have been able to later on in their careers generate some value. Patrick Robinson's, for example, where they're not exactly lost cause and there's a ton of value in that position. So I think you try him there, and then, but they do have to draft, I think, at the position heavily, especially given, the types of players that will be available to them at 5 and hopefully when they move back.
If you could somehow entice the Giants to trade up with you and you can get an extra, pick somewhere, that I think that would be ideal. But I think you probably try and move back and acquire, one of those 3 corners, right? DeAndre Baker, Greedy Williams, Byron Murphy, one of those guys, in the middle of the round, and hope that there's a player someone wants to move up for.
There's enough plausible deniability for the Bucs at 5. New coach, quarterbacks that have struggled. You can, I think, convince the Giants, look, we're in the market for a QB. if you want to secure a QB, you better trade with us, and you could pick up an extra pick, move down a little bit, get an opportunity to get more value, because I think that's really where Tampa. I mean, there's good corners that'll be had in this draft. I think Tampa Bay should come out with at least one of them, given all the deficiencies they've had defensively for 3-4 years now.
I mean, I talked about how the Niners' numbers in coverage, covering wide receivers, was like abysmal. The Bucs are at the bottom of every single coverage metric that you look at. Yeah. They made the Raiders look like a passable coverage unit at times. So they really need to focus on coverage. And with an offense that could be as good as, I think, Arians and Winston, if he kind of gets it together with those receivers. If you said that their win total was 6.5, over sounds enticing to me.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're looking at the scope of the NFC, I think the NFC, as we've seen it last year, was far more mediocre than we gave it credit for. Yep. There's a big question. I think what's a regression candidate next year? New Orleans, right? New Orleans. The NFC North is. I think you're going to see the Bears regress a little bit. I think Minnesota's a question mark. I think even at their own division, Atlanta, it's like, I'm not exactly sure what to expect out of Atlanta. And then Carolina, we don't even know if Newton's going to play, and so if you're just talking about just leaning into a record, we've seen Arians get to 8-8 with far worse.
Worse.
And so I do agree with you. I would be interested to see what the number is after laying a 6.5 last year, getting only to 5. I mean, if this thing opens at even if in the 5s, man, I think it's a lock.
Okay, so I was going to say, to me, this is opening at 7.
Okay.
I think they deal with it, they tinker with it, use it, with the juice as appropriate. But I think it actually opens higher. I think the love for Arians is great there. But if it's 5.5, then I'm here to take the over, baby.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Next week we've got you dressed in splendor, in glory. Make sure you check that out. Don't bring any children. We don't want to scare them.
I have to go to the tanning
with the guns. And Fred Godelli will be joining us, Hall of Fame producer of Sunday Night Football.
Already tan.
He is already tan. Yeah, that's true. I am not. I get called out for it a lot. It's sad, unfortunate. But oh well. See you guys later. Peace.